Hello, hello. Welcome back to Loki's Library. And if you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina. Yes, my microphone is on. I am your librarian, Katrina, and this is where I'm reading through the enormous library of books that you see behind me, and then I give you a quick synopsis and tell you what I think about them. So if you like books, just aren't sure what to read next, hit that subscribe button, like and share my videos, and let me know what you think in the comments. This week's book was part of a binge shop I did last year. I did another binge just recently, but this was not part of that. But I did buy it at the same time that I bought Fingerprints of the Gods, making this week's book of the week another Graham Hancock book, Magicians of the Gods, which is the sequel to Fingerprints. Sort of fitting, I guess. I mean, I started the book with the year with Fingerprints, so it makes sense to end with Magicians. Kind of bookend my year with Graham Hancock books, novels, whatever. The accompanying cocktail is from the book Tarot and Tequila, which I have. Here's the picture of it. It's just still buried, but I had the cocktail available. It is the Magician, also the Magician. A second Magician cocktail. I had one way back when I did Martin Van Buren. I did a Magician cocktail. This is not that cocktail. This one is 2 ounces of anejo tequila, 1 ounce of lemon juice, a ½ ounce of maple syrup, 1 ounce of cabernet sauvignon, and an orange peel for garnish. So let's do this. What am I doing? 2 ounces of tequila. 2 ounces of anejo tequila. Now, Magicians of the Gods is billed as a sequel to Fingerprints of the Gods, and it is in many ways. It's not, an exact sequel, but it's not exactly like it's a novel either, right? It is, Hancock expands on and repeats several of his hypotheses from Fingerprints of the Gods to include new information that further supports his original hypothesis and to account for new information that Hancock was not aware of when Fingerprints was originally published in 1996. I'm going to screw this up. I just know it. What do you say, 1 ounce? 2 ounces of the tequila. Information like the importance of Gobekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey. Now, Gobekli Tepe was originally identified in 1964, so it's obviously way older than that. But archaeologists found it. They just didn't recognize how significant of a find this was. It would not be until 1994 when German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt was basically looking for a project on which he could make a name for himself and stumbled upon this earlier study about Gobekli Tepe. It was entirely unstudied. It was basically, we found this. Do what you want with it. And he did. So he went out and Gobekli took off from there. Now, what is Gobekli Tepe? So, if you haven't heard of it, Gobekli Tepe is a megalithic underground metropolis, basically. Possibly a necropolis that was buried 11,600 years ago at approximately 9600 BC. Now, what's interesting about that is that it was buried 11,600 years ago, which means it was built well before then. And how can they possibly know it was buried, right? And that sounds like a really? That doesn't seem likely. I know I should be doing fresh lemon. I'm doing lemon juice from the bottle because my kitchen is mostly complete, but I still don't quite have everything, and so I just went with the bottled lemon juice. I'm a bad cocktail mixtress. Well, carbon dating is how they figured that out. Now, carbon dating gets a lot of play in shows about archaeology, right? We carbon dated it to this. Here's the thing. Stone can't be carbon dated. Only organic material can be carbon dated because carbon is organic. So that's what they're actually dating, is the organic carbon. So when you carbon date, you're only getting an approximation of when that organic material last saw the light of day. And there is always a possibility of cross-contamination, which is why there is kind of like plus value minuses to carbon dating. And really all it means is that is when that piece of carbon material stuck to the stone, that's what was dated. Now, if the site has been left open to the elements for the entire time, then forget it, because the carbon material basically has no chance to grow. It just keeps, blowing around, especially in the deserts of Turkey. But I'm probably screwing up this explanation, but I'm hoping to get there. So the only hope of dating then at that point, if it had been left open to the elements for the entire time, would be through geological erosion. And those theories also have problems, which we're going to get back to in just a minute. But with Gobekli Tepe, when they started digging it out, they found organic material that was last in the open in 9600 BC. So why is Schmidt so certain that the makers of this site buried it deliberately and that it wasn't like an accidental burial as a result of a different catastrophe? Let's say ½ ounce of maple syrup. Well, other catastrophes would have taken out the massive pillars that are kind of one of the hallmarks of Gobekli Tepe. What pancakes now? So it would have taken out the massive pillars for one. For another, there were no bodies found in Gobekli Tepe, no remnants of anything living, which if it had been buried as a result of a catastrophe like Pompeii, for example, you would have expected to see bodies everywhere. They found no broken pottery lying around. There's nothing. There's no bones. There's nothing. It's a completely empty ancient city. It's like the inhabitants just packed up, moved out, and buried what was left. Let me shake this up really quick. And didn't want to open a whole big bottle of wine, so I just got a black box cabernet sauvignon. It's fine. It's fine. I say 1 ounce of that. 1 ounce. Floated on top. Did not bring anything to help with floating, so I'm just going to have to kind of... Sure, why not? Oh no, I got wine on my desk. The orange peel, you can optionally flame it. I'm not doing fire today. Oh yeah, I'm totally suave like a bartender should be. Empty city, they packed up, moved out, and then buried what was left. So Gobekli Tepe raises a lot of questions, but no real answers. It's clearly man-made, but why was it abandoned? And if we were all hunter-gatherers until 10,000 years ago, who the hell made it 11,000 years ago? My math is off there. My math is off there. He explains it much better in the book. I know my math is off there. Let's say 12,000 years ago, because it's older. It was a functioning city for approximately 2,000 years, they think, before they buried it. And so if everybody were hunter-gatherers, who the heck built it and occupied it for those 2,000 years? Which brings us to the next new piece of information that Hancock goes into, which is the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Not too bad. I'm not really a wine person, like, at all. So this is a big one. And this one I kind of understood a little bit better than the implications of I understand the implications of Gobekli Tepe, but I feel like I can explain Younger Dryas a little bit better. So the last ice age was just ending. Earth was starting to heat up around 13,000 years ago, kind of give or take that, 100 years or so, when something brought a sudden abrupt end to global warming. Or to the warming, excuse me. So the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis posits that the cause of the sudden cooling is that a comet hit the North American ice sheet, causing a massive flood. And the sudden influx of cold water, like ice cold water, because ice sheets melting, into the oceans of the world caused a massive temperature drop in the oceans, which caused the ice sheets and overall cooling to return for several thousand years, approximately 2,000. And then a second impact happened. Another comet hit, this time landing in the ocean, which immediately heated up the oceans, reversing that cooling, causing some global warming to happen. So basically it was an instant like Uno reverse card from the cosmos, okay? The Younger Dryas theory hypothesis actively supports an earlier hypothesis floated by geologist J. Harlan Bretz in 1928. Now, Bretz was a doctorate in geology. He had his PhD in geology. He genuinely understood what he was talking about and was shunned by the rest of the geologists for voicing where the science took him, which was catastrophe, specifically that of a catastrophic flood that had created the scablands of Washington state. Except geologists then and now despise the idea of catastrophic flooding. It's too biblical for them to be scientific. Couldn't possibly be accurate because it was in the Bible. It must be wrong. Never mind that literally every culture, Christian, non-Christian, doesn't matter, every culture has flood stories. Every single one of them, including Native Americans, Hindu culture, the Buddhist culture. They all have flood myths, but it's too biblical, can't have happened. I'm going to kind of come back to rant on that a little bit at the end. So even though all of the science is literally right before their eyes, the scablands were a result of a monumental massive flood. It did not fit the prevailing opinion that all geological change can only be the result of gradual erosion. Which is really interesting because all those geologists seem to forget the New Madrid earthquakes of 1811 and 1812, which were centered roughly in Missouri, but were felt as far away as Louisville, Kentucky, which was like 200 miles away. All right, massive earthquake. Temporarily caused the Mississippi River to run backwards. All right, you think that didn't fuck with our geology a little bit? That was a massive catastrophe, but nobody mentions that one. And even that catastrophe, interestingly enough, God, I think I read somewhere that the New Madrid earthquakes were felt as far away as D.C. I mean, it was massive. Even that was not enough, would not have been enough to cause the scablands. I'll see if I can find some like open source pictures that I can post so you can see what they look like. But yeah, I'm agreeing with him there. That doesn't make sense. Now, the biggest pushback that Bretz received to his theory was a lack of a mechanism. I mean, if catastrophic flooding happened, what caused the catastrophe, right? Because it didn't just happen. Something caused it. What caused it? Now, he didn't really have an answer to that question. Like, he genuinely didn't know. I mean, he believed it was the Spokane ice sheet, which is now called the Cordilleran ice sheet, that had suddenly melted, possibly due to volcanic activity, but that was the only thing he could think of that might have caused that sudden heat, because the comet theory was well in the future. Not just from the younger Dryas, but like even they didn't even know it killed the dinosaurs back then, so they didn't even know that a comet could have hit the Earth and caused it. Should have, they had that shockwave that took out the 1908 Tunguska event. Jesus, I couldn't think of it for the love of me. I knew it was in Russia. So the Tunguska event in 1908 was essentially a shockwave explosion because of a comet hitting the atmosphere and exploding, basically. I'm probably screwing that one up too, but they are aware that these things could happen, and nobody keyed that might have been what caused this ice sheet to melt and cause this flooding. If there had been a volcanic activity, which is the only thing he could think of, though, there would have been evidence of that. Easy to see evidence that other geologists could have been like, yes, I can wrap my head around this, I agree with you, but none of that was there. So he was sure the ice sheet had suddenly melted, resulting in this flooding, but could not explain how or why. But the damage to the scablands fit a sudden catastrophic flood better than gradual erosion. So he stuck to his guns on his theory. And that was in 1928, and like 50 years later, like all through the 20th century, up until the late 70s, and he died in like 81, I think. He stuck to that theory, and the rest of the geologists eventually came around to Bretz's way of thinking, sort of. And he sort of met them halfway by agreeing that a failure of the natural dams at the glacial Lake Missoula could have caused some of the damage to the scablands in a one-time massive flood. Over time, the established geological school of thought, that of gradual damage doing this erosion, again took control of the theory, and it went from being a one-time failure of a natural dam to several over centuries, until I believe the current thought is that several hundreds of small failures over millennia caused the lake to drain, and the scablands erosion is explained by this gradualist school of thought. And Bretz is kind of neatly shuffled into the sidelines of history until 2007. When a team of scientists led by Richard Firestone and there are others on there. It wasn't just Firestone. He's actually, I think, a chemist by trade, but there were others on there, like an astrophysicist and geologist. They were all on there. They floated the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which, of course, is receiving pushback from the gradualist school of thought, which keeps trying to declare the hypothesis dead, except that every time an independent team of scientists sets out to repeat the experiments that led them to Younger Dryas, which has gone deeply in the book, way above my ability to comprehend or to repeat here. No, that's not true. I comprehend it. It's just a lot of information, and I don't want to go into the weeds repeating it. But they keep confirming the results. The only ones who are unable to repeat the results use like flawed methodology, which is what Firestone repeatedly points out when he rebuts their rebuttal. He's like, yes, but did you follow our methodology? That's what makes science. Science is you're getting the exact same results over and over and over again, no matter who does the experiment. And if they aren't following the same methodology, they're going to get different results. That's how we know it's flawed science. So there's quite a bit of evidence, like hard science evidence, to support the Younger Dryas event happened. And it does explain the scablands, because if a comet hit the Cordilleran ice sheet, it would have instantly melted an enormous chunk of that sheet, because heat from the comet entering the atmosphere. The comet itself is hot, which would have caused massive catastrophic flooding before being swept away into the ocean. Basically, the comet went with everything else right into the ocean, where we're never going to find that thing. Well, we probably will, just we don't have the technology for it yet. Now, along with all the water it had just created, of course. So the ice-cold water would then cause the temperature in the oceans to drop, bringing a return of the ice age that had just ended, along with massive flooding everywhere. Which brings us to the third really new point in the book, which is Gunung Padang in Indonesia. Now, there is some evidence that this may be the oldest known pyramid. Now, again, geologists have done an impressive amount of research, pulling core samples from the pyramid that shows carbon dating, again, from a closed room, if you will, of about 11,000 years ago. Now, the problem here is purely political. All right, it's not just scientists pushing back against scientists. The lead scientist who's been leading the charge on exploring Gunung Padang and its possible historical significance is Danny Natuwidaha. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Unfortunately, he is not in political favor and not in charge of the archaeological departments in Indonesia. For the very brief time they had a president who was willing to explore it, the ruling class of archaeologists over there, if you will, complained that money that should be funneled to them was being funneled to Gunung Padang, and when that president was voted out, he lost the funding, and now it's just kind of sitting in this limbo with the powers that be saying, no, it's just a mountain, there is no pyramid there, even though there's some compelling evidence that there could be. For me, I'm as an outsider, I'm like, hey, if you're so sure that it's just a mountain and not man-made, what's the harm of digging to find out? I mean, make sure you're not going to cause any landslides or anything with a misplaced pickaxe, but let them dig. If you're right, then the whole world will know it. And therein lies the problem, right? Because if they're wrong, then the whole world will know that you are deliberately blocking progress and knowledge for your own ego, which creates very bad optics indeed. Now, Hancock uses this book as an opportunity to explore many other mysteries, all of which absolutely support his belief that there was, around 12,000 years ago, a massive cataclysm that wiped out most of humanity, leaving us essentially, as he says it repeatedly, a species with amnesia. Especially humanity that had become soft from city living and was no longer able to live off the land, leaving the hunter-gatherers, who are able to live off the land, as the sole survivors. Hancock believes Gobekli Tepe was built by some of these giant thinkers, and most likely the reason for the abandonment is that the city had served its purpose. And it was built to give them some place to weather out the storm of the younger Dryas ice age. And when the second comet hit, reversing that overall cool down, the city was no longer needed, and so it was abandoned. One more thing to come out of Gobekli Tepe, though, is that Hancock believes the creators of Gobekli Tepe were well aware of the precession of the equinox. Precession is just basically the movement of the stars around the Earth, basically working around 26,000 years to move through all 12 sectors of the sky, which is just the constellations, right? What we call, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius. That's the part of the precession of the equinoxes. And he goes into that in Fingerprints when he's talking about the Sphinx and the pyramids at Giza and how they line up with Orion's belt and are looking at the dog star, if you will. Now, that's the short answer. It's not the sciencey version of precession of the equinox. But that Gobekli Tepe was left as a bit of a warning that certain phases of the precession could bring more comets. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I kind of look at what a shit show humanity has become. I'm ready for a little skyfire to wipe us all out. I'd probably die because I'm not one of those hunter-gatherers. I could probably plant something if I needed to. I'd probably be one of the ones to die. I'm okay with that. Humanity's an absolute shit show right now. I mean, my God. Have men think they're women and women think that men can give birth. It's just absolutely insane out there right now. The hunter-gatherer ancestors are laughing at us. I had no idea what they were getting into when they started creating cities. And they're probably yeah, I just let the hunter-gatherers start again. I mean, we haven't exactly made the most out of everything to make humanity better. We're actually regressing, becoming shittier to each other. And as time goes on, And we all know if calamity strikes, we'll be climbing over each other to be man on top. Because as a society, we no longer know how to cooperate with each other for survival. I think that's the real problem. The real reason, I genuinely believe this, the real reason the scientists are so against these theories is not that they're bad or there's anything actually wrong with them, or even that they're wrong. It's that their ego won't let them admit that they may have made a mistake in the past. And that's very much a sign of decay in society, not being able to acknowledge when you may have made an error. It's insane. I think that Hancock has compiled an impressive amount of evidence to support his belief that we are not the first humans to master high science, which certainly includes advanced architecture, advanced astronomy, advanced building, advanced construction, just the advanced sciences in general, which include like math, chemistry, geology, geometry. I think I said during my review of Fingerprints of the Gods that I thought the scientists were incredibly foolish for ignoring the oral traditions of people. And that's the reason the scientists, or the geologists at least, push back against the data of massive flooding on a biblical scale. And here's the thing, as I know I mentioned this before, oral tradition is a lot older than a written tradition because you learn to speak before you learn to read. Verbal communication is actually a more perfect form of communication than oral than written because you learn to speak first. Written tradition lets you get it just right. Think of what you mean before you write it down, but speaking in the heat of the moment is pure, right? There's no coming back from that. What you said can't be taken back, which makes the oral tradition a lot stronger. Something like 94% of human history occurred before written history. All we had for the vast majority of our lives was an oral history, as far as we know. There are, in fact, several language stones that have not been translated from civilizations far older than Egypt, and which there's no Rosetta Stone for, so we have no idea what they say. I did a quick Google search just to see how many there were, and there's like 6 or 7. We had Linear A, Rongo, Indus Valley, Linear Elamite, Cretan hieroglyphics, Etruscan, and Olmec. None of those have been translated. We have no idea what they say. All of these civilizations are quite old. The only one he touches on in the book is Rongo, which is the language tablets that were found on Easter Island with the Mao carved heads. The carved heads of Easter Island, these guys. They found scripts that's called Rongo. Nobody knows what it says. So it's entirely possible that Hancock is exactly right. That we just can't read the stories that are being told to us because the language is now dead, which makes the oral tradition even stronger because those stories survive, right? They'll survive through language as it transmutes, whereas a written record is wiped out with the floods. This book provided interesting food for thought. It was a refinement of Hancock's other works, but to me, it was a bit disjointed, kind of like this review. It was a bit disjointed. Fingerprints was easier to read. It just was. Magicians provides further detail to that, but it would kind of be convenient if he would combine the two books into one, like a primer for Graham Hancock or something. But that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe. Sorry, it is a little chaotic today. It's been a day. It's been a weekend, but my kitchen's functioning again. I'll see you guys on Sunday. Bye.